A single update to start a brand new chapter. The day I finalized my divorce from Madeline, I booked a high-speed train ticket back to my rural hometown. A mobile phone and a bank card with a meager remaining balance were all I had to show for the years I spent in the city. The housekeeper called me, mentioning that I had left some belongings behind and asking if they should be tossed. "I don't need them anymore," I replied flatly. He then added that my little daughter kept crying, asking for her father. "She'll have a new father soon enough," I said. "The one she's always been waiting for." My daughter took after her mother in every way, even down to the man she chose to call Dad. I used to be heartbroken over it, wondering why that man couldn't be me. Now, I realize that if love isn't there, it simply isn't there. There is nothing more to it. Just before the train departed, I spoke my final words into the receiver. "Tell her that she can rest easy. I will never trouble her again for as long as I live." With that, I hung up and swapped out my SIM card. From this moment on, this city had nothing to do with me. Sitting beside me was a little girl about my daughter's age, her eyes round and alert as she watched me. I used to love children, but now I felt nothing. She wasn't noisy. She remained perfectly behaved throughout the journey. Her parents, on the other hand, were a different story. They were constantly on their phones, shouting and arguing without end. I eventually put on my headphones and closed my eyes to rest. I don't know how much time had passed when someone gently tugged on my sleeve. I opened my eyes to find the little girl biting her lip. "Mister," she whispered, "my daddy is gone. Can you help me find him?" The seat by the aisle was empty. Confused, I alerted the train staff and the onboard security. After a quick investigation, they discovered that the girl's father had gotten off at a midway station. CCTV footage showed him looking back over his shoulder as he left, terrified that the girl might be following him. In other words, she had been abandoned. The carriage erupted in noise as passengers began to gossip. They didn't hold back, whispering right in front of the child about how cold-hearted her father was and how pitiful she had become. The girl sat silently in her seat. She didn't cry, and she didn't throw a tantrum. I thought about it for a long moment. Finally, I presented my ID to the officers and left my home address and contact information. And so, when I stepped off the train, I had more than just a phone and a nearly empty bank card. I had a child. I officially settled back into my hometown. I began to repair the dilapidated cottage and plant vegetables in the garden. I took my grandmother's portrait, framed it carefully, and hung it in the very center of the living room. I named the little girl Skylar, handled the paperwork, and registered her as my legal dependent. Finally, she was no longer just a stray soul on a piece of paper. Skylar didn't like to smile much. She was always solemn, watching me with a serious, observant gaze. She understood everything. Despite being only 4 years old, she carried herself with a maturity far beyond her age. On the days I fell ill, she would drag a chair to the stove just to cook porridge for me. It made me think of my biological daughter, Snow, the young heiress of the Sterling family. If Snow wanted ski, she was gifted an entire resort. If she wanted candy, she was given a whole factory. Skylar was the complete opposite. Once, she asked me why I had adopted her, calling herself a burden. I ruffled her hair and replied, "Because I'm very lonely. Could you stay by my side from now on?" She stared at me in silence for a long time before nodding firmly. "Okay, I'll stay with you forever." The days blurred into months, and soon Skylar began attending preschool. Then one day, I received an unexpected call from her teacher. She told me Skylar had gotten into a fight with another student. I was stunned. Skylar was a gentle, obedient child with a stoic temperament. She rarely even looked at the other children, often dismissing them as too childish. I rushed to the school. The teacher met me at the gate, her face clouded with awkwardness. "The child Skylar fought with is a new transfer student who arrived just today. Why do they fight?" That was the only thing I wanted to know. The teacher looked at me with a strange, searching expression. "Well, the other girl, Snow Sterling, claimed that Skylar was trying to steal her father." "What did you say?" I froze. Snow found a photo of you and Skylar together in Skylar's pencil case. When she saw it, she called Skylar shameless for trying to take her dad. I didn't say another word, silently following the teacher to the office. As we reached the door, she turned back to me. "By the way, Snow's mother is already here." Standing at the threshold, my first instinct was to look for Skylar. Seeing her sitting quietly, focused on her workbook as if nothing had happened, I let out a breath of relief. From the corner of my eye, I saw the other child fuming. When Snow saw me, her eyes lit up. She ran toward me as fast as her small legs could carry her. "Daddy!" I knelt down as she approached, but I didn't pull her into an embrace. Instead, I gently held her at arm's length, stopping her. "Little one, you've mistaken me for someone else." I offered a polite, distant smile, then looked up to meet the eyes of the woman standing in the room. "Hello, I am Skylar's father. I never imagined I would see Madeline again. The world is vast. Yet it seems those we wish to avoid are the ones we are most likely to encounter." Snow began to wail, her voice thick with accusation as she sobbed, blaming me for abandoning her. Skylar gripped her pen so hard her knuckles turned white. I could tell she was reaching her breaking point. Madeline stood there in silence, her eyes fixed on me, waiting. I knew she was gauging my reaction, expecting the same old devotion. I walked over and helped Skylar pack her work into her bag. "Can you head home first?" Skylar nodded without a second thought. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and walked out the door without a single backward glance. The moment she was gone, Snow's tears vanished. She scrambled over and clung to my leg. "Daddy, please don't be mad anymore. I've learned my lesson." I leaned down, offered a polite smile as I patted her head, and then looked up at Madeline. "Ms. Sterling, can we speak privately?" The history between Madeline and me was, in truth, quite unremarkable. Years ago, my grandmother had been a benefactor to the Sterling family. She had reportedly saved Madeline's grandmother from a kidnapping attempt. Because of that debt, the Sterlings sent us gifts every holiday. When I got into university, my grandmother was too frail to worry about me. Fearing I wouldn't survive the cutthroat pace of the big city alone, she reached out to the Sterlings for help. That year, I stepped off the train hauling heavy bags, only to find Madeline leaning against a luxury car, bored, her head tilted down as she played on her phone. She was radiant. Every beautiful word I had ever learned felt inadequate to describe her. Falling for her wasn't a choice. It was an inevitability. I knew we didn't belong to the same world. I never dared to dream of anything more. To me, she was the moon hanging high in the heavens. I was content just to walk through the light she cast upon the ground. We attended the same university. Occasionally, at her elder's request, she would bring me things, and over time, we became casual acquaintances. Later, I heard the stories of her romance with her childhood sweetheart. Their love was a drama, intense, sweet, punctuated by volatile arguments and tearful reconciliations. I was merely a spectator, watching from the sidelines with a hollow ache in my chest. During my junior year, I started an internship. The office was far from campus, and the daily commute was exhausting. When I bumped into Madeline and she asked how I was doing, I told her the truth. Shortly after, I received a call from her grandmother. She mentioned they had a vacant apartment near my office and insisted I move in. It is impossible to refuse the kindness of an elder, and I was deeply grateful. After I moved in, I discovered traces of Madeline's life scattered everywhere. Feeling as though my own thoughts were becoming impure, I retreated, stuffing all my belongings into the guest room in a desperate attempt to minimize my presence. Everything changed one night when I returned late from work. I found Madeline lying on the sofa, dazed and smelling of alcohol. I intended to avoid her, but worrying she might catch a cold, I grabbed a spare blanket to cover her. She opened her eyes and looked at me. I expected her to demand why I was in her house. Instead, she pulled me down toward her, leading to the greatest mistake of my life. We only ever did it that one time, and throughout it all, the name she whispered was someone else's. Thinking back, it seems that even now, Madeline has only ever truly looked at me once, that day at the train station when she scanned me from head to toe. The school grounds were silent after classes. Madeline and I stood at the end of the corridor, framed by the lush greenery behind us. "Didn't you want to talk privately?" Madeline asked. "If you have something to say, say it." Since she had opened the door, I didn't hesitate. "What have you been telling Snow all these years?" "We've been divorced for 4 years now. Throughout that time, I've kept my promise to stay out of sight. I've sent child support to your account every single month without fail." I paused, looking her in the eye. A child's memory is short. Besides, Snow never liked me back then. If no one was constantly reminding her, how could she possibly remember me, let alone claim to have feelings for me? Madeline looked away. "I never said anything to her. It was Grandma. She was the one who kept bringing you up. Then why the transfer to this school?" "She was adamant about finding you," Madeline said after a brief silence. I couldn't stop her. Of course, Snow Sterling was the most pampered soul in the entire family. Whatever she wanted, she got. Even Madeline abandoned all her principles when it came to her daughter. I lowered my head, lost in thought for a long moment before a small, weary smile touched my lips. It's fine. Once her expectations of me shatter, she'll want to go home on her own. I've never been someone people genuinely like. I continued, my voice steady. Once Snow spends enough time with me, she'll realize that. Her memories have painted a golden version of me. But in reality, I'm still just the same detestable man. All my presence will do is make her realize how much her status has dropped by being near me. After returning to my hometown to make a living, I opened a small eatery. Since I ran it alone and couldn't serve many people, I decided to limit the number of daily customers. To my surprise, the shop gradually became famous, eventually becoming a popular destination for tourists. My little eatery became an overnight sensation on social media. At 18, I dreamt of being a CEO, pulling in millions a year, and I studied information technology because it was the fastest path to wealth. Now, at 28, all I want is to hold on to this small shop, less than 100 square feet, and live out the rest of my life in peace. Ever since Snow transferred here, a chauffeur drops her off at my shop every day after school. She is clever. Within just one day of our reunion, she reverted to her stubborn, headstrong self. Madeline rarely makes an appearance. Most of the time, the only person by Snow's side is the driver. I'm not sure what the Sterling family is thinking. If they care for her so much, how can they be comfortable leaving a child alone in this remote little town? I don't chase her away. After all, she is the only person left on this earth who shares my blood. There was a time when I nursed her for 3 days and nights without sleep when she had a high fever. There was another time I hand-carved a toy she wanted so badly that my hands were covered in cuts. I have to admit, human nature is inherently selfless. At least, mine was. I didn't do those things expecting anything in return. But after everything I sacrificed, all I received was her loathing and indifference. It stung more than I cared to admit. When she was a toddler, she was inseparable from me. She couldn't fall asleep unless I was right there. It was her dependence on me that gave me the strength to endure the contemptuous glares and the stifling atmosphere of the Sterling household. But as she grew older, gained her own consciousness, and learned to walk, she began to dislike me. It started simply because I wouldn't let her eat too much candy. Children don't understand right from wrong or good from evil. They only know that I was the one constantly setting boundaries, so they naturally resented me. One day, Madeline took Snow out for the day. When they returned, Snow looked me in the eye and said, "I don't want you to be my dad. You don't deserve it. Get out. This is my house." Skylar once asked me in private, "Can I choose not to be friends with Snow? I don't like her." "Of course you can," I replied. I didn't mind her feelings, but I found it curious. "Why don't you like her?" Skylar is a generous child. She rarely expresses outright hatred toward anyone. Usually, she's just indifferent. "She hurts you," Skylar said, her tone flat and calm. "Every time you see her, you look sad. She knows that, but she keeps showing up in front of you on purpose." After saying that, Skylar lowered her head, looking genuinely frustrated. "Can I pick a fight with her? I can't take on the adults yet, but I can definitely beat Snow." She paused, thinking for a moment before continuing. "Daddy, can you sign me up for martial arts classes? I want to be strong. I'm going to protect you." I agreed, and Skylar took to her training with a fierce dedication. Her instructor often remarked, "Your daughter works harder than kids twice her age." His words brought back a memory of Madeline pointing at me, her voice dripping with mockery. "A man like you? Who could ever truly love you?" She was wrong. Madeline's grandmother loved me, and Skylar loved me. Madeline began to appear more frequently. Every time she showed up, she looked exhausted, as if she were constantly rushing. She would sit in my shop for a while, order 2 dishes, eat in silence, and then take Snow home. My neighbors started whispering, asking if a wealthy socialite was trying to court me. They didn't know she was my ex-wife. They only saw a rich lady trailing after a humble cook. Each time, I just laughed and shook my head. "She's not blind," I'd say. "She's here for the kid, not for me." In the past, I would have analyzed every move Madeline made, searching for a hidden motive. But now, I felt no curiosity toward her. I didn't care why she came or why she left. Occasionally, I wondered when Snow would finally tire of this pointless game of trying to win my favor. She had been in this small town, a place with no aquariums, no theme parks, and no shopping malls, for nearly 3 months. Perhaps it's a flaw buried deep in human nature. The things we cannot have are the only things that seem precious. Even a child isn't immune to that law. The colder I acted toward her, the more she clung to me. Sadness often flickered across her face. She would watch me silently when I gently held Skylar's hand, when I knelt to adjust Skylar's dress, or when I brought out a special dessert made specifically for Skylar from the kitchen. But the moment I looked her way, she would force a bright, sweet smile to mask her loneliness. Human affection changes with the tide of emotion. When I loved that child, a tiny scratch on her knee would break my heart for days. Now, even when I can tell she's putting on a brave face, I feel nothing. I catch myself wondering why she hasn't left yet. Her presence is a nuisance, even if I don't hate her. Summer arrived, and with the closing ceremony, the holidays officially began. That day, I opened the shop as usual, but Snow never showed up. I figured she had finally grown bored of the game and decided to return to her true life as a pampered heiress. But when I returned home that evening, I found her sitting obediently on my doorstep, clutching an exquisite birthday cake box. Madeline sat beside her, several gift bags arranged neatly around them. The striking beauty of the mother and daughter caused every passerby to steal a glance. But the two of them were focused only on what lay ahead. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" "Soon, I'm sure. We're here specifically to celebrate your birthday. You've prepared so much. I'm sure he'll be happy." "I hope so," Snow whispered, her face lit with a smile of pure anticipation. She was dressed in a formal little gown, her face carefully made up for the occasion. But the summer air was sweltering. She had likely been waiting a long time, as beads of sweat dotted her forehead. Or perhaps it wasn't the heat, but the restless excitement of the moment. I stopped a short distance away, but Skylar didn't hesitate. She marched right up to the two of them, her voice clear and piercing. "You're mistaken. It's not Daddy's birthday today. You're lying." Snow rarely confronted Skylar directly. She knew how much I cherished Skylar and didn't want to upset me, usually choosing to avoid her. But now, she stood up defiantly and shouted, "It is Daddy's birthday. We share the same birthday. I couldn't possibly be wrong." Seeing me approach, Madeline stood up as well. She remained silent, but her face was etched with a clear, hopeful expectation. "Happy birthday," I said as I drew near. I pulled out my keys to unlock the front door, looking at her calmly. "I forgot to tell you, I've changed my birthday now." I paused for a moment before adding, "Not that a small detail like that should concern you. In the past, I loved birthdays. My grandmother was a woman who held a deep sense of tradition and ritual. Every year on my birthday, she would prepare a massive feast, a beautiful cake, and an exquisite gift. Even though it was just the two of us, the house never felt cold. As her health declined, she couldn't travel far. But once I started university, everything changed. I couldn't celebrate at home anymore. So every year at this time, she would travel thousands of miles to the city just to blow out the candles and eat cake with me. As long as she was alive, I never felt alone. The year of my last birthday with her, she had rushed to my side, as usual. By then, the incident with Madeline had already happened. Afraid that she would worry about me being mistreated in the Sterling household, I lied and told her Madeline treated me wonderfully. In reality, Madeline barely acknowledged my existence. We lived under the same roof, but she treated me like a ghost, invisible and transparent. At the time, I thought I understood. That night between us had been a mistake. I even told myself that, in a way, Madeline was the victim of a bad situation. I had planned to leave quietly after everything was over. As long as I kept my mouth shut, no one in the world would ever know what had happened that night. But the reality was different. Madeline had clung to me throughout the night, refusing to let go. By the time I gathered enough strength to leave, the front door was opened by my grandmother, who had come for a surprise visit. Thinking I was simply exhausted from work, she had brought me a bowl of homemade chicken soup. And just like that, the situation bolted like a wild horse. There was no turning back. My grandmother didn't care for the complicated romantic entanglements of young people. All she knew was that since Madeline and I had been together, we had to take responsibility. Whether Madeline loved someone else, whether the Sterling family found me worthy as a son-in-law, or even whether I actually wanted to marry her, none of that concerned her. "Ethan," she told me, her voice frail, "I've already spoken to their side about you and Madeline. My health is failing, and you don't want me worrying about you, do you? I can see that there's some spark between you two." She continued, "You're a good boy, and I know you don't want to ruin things between Madeline and Julian Thorne. But what's done is done. A man like Julian won't accept even a speck of dust in his eyes. There is no future for him and Madeline now. Won't you just try for once?" I have to admit, for a brief second, my heart wavered. However, before I could even make a choice, Madeline discovered she was pregnant. Her morning sickness was severe, making it impossible to hide the truth. Left with no way out, I had to grit my teeth and endure Madeline's looks of pure loathing as we entered a marriage that was doomed to be miserable. Sometimes I truly hated myself for the submissive nature buried in my bones. I had to play the part of the happy, sweet husband in front of our elders, but in truth, I was drowning in agony. I was ignored by the Sterlings and despised by my own wife. Still, I insisted on celebrating my birthday one more time. My grandmother was overjoyed. She didn't just prepare a gift. She announced she would stay with us this time. She wanted to be there for the birth and stay until Madeline finished her postpartum recovery. But she never lived to see Snow's birth. On my birthday, I took my grandmother out for dinner. There, with her own eyes, she saw Madeline and Julian Thorne intimately holding hands, sharing a sweet kiss. The shock triggered a heart attack, and she was rushed to the hospital. Perhaps that was the moment I began to truly resent Madeline. I wasn't the one who had made the mistake. I was the greatest victim in all of this. Why did I have to be the one to carry all the pain? My grandmother was taken straight into the emergency room. Before long, the Sterling family arrived. Madeline's grandmother slapped her hard across the face right in front of me, and for the first time, I didn't move to stop it. I didn't care. I just waited outside the operating theater, desperate for the doctor to bring me good news. But soon, the lights above the door flickered out. The doctor stepped out, his voice heavy as he told me to say my final goodbyes. How cruel life can be. My grandmother, who just an hour ago was smiling and holding my hand, telling me she had hand-stitched a soft little gift for her great-grandchild, was now being snatched away forever. Madeline's grandmother was sobbing hysterically, repeating, "I'm sorry," over and over. But I couldn't hear a thing. I could only sit there, dazed, gripping my grandmother's hand with everything I had, terrified that if I let go, I would never be able to touch her again. "I know you've been married, but you're not happy. You just didn't want me to worry, so you kept it all inside, didn't you?" My grandmother lay on the hospital bed, her eyes filled with a heartbreaking pity. "Ethan, I can't stay with you anymore." She wept in agony, her voice choking. "My poor boy, what will you do? Who can I leave you with?" "Dear sister, please rest easy. I promise I will take care of Ethan." Madeline's grandmother made a tearful vow and dragged Madeline over, demanding she make a promise as well. Madeline sat by the bed and whispered, "Grandma, don't worry. I'll take good care of him." My grandmother looked at her with clouded eyes and smiled bitterly. "The greatest regret of my life was ever asking you people to look after him." She squeezed my hand, her eyes swimming with a deep, lingering attachment. But in the end, she had to go, carrying her resentment and profound sorrow into the next world. Perhaps Madeline felt a flicker of guilt then. After my grandmother passed, she stopped seeing Julian Thorne for a while. Though we still barely spoke, we managed to maintain a cold sense of decorum. Heartbroken, Julian moved abroad and rarely contacted her. I began to think my life would simply remain this way, anchored to a loveless marriage and a wife who didn't want me. But then, Julian Thorne returned. The moment he stepped back into our lives, he stole every ounce of attention from Madeline and Snow. Every bit of affection I might have possessed, and the love I never truly had. Thorne took it all without a second thought. On Snow's birthday, he told her he had a massive surprise waiting for her. Without a moment's hesitation, Snow ran straight into his arms. Madeline told me that Thorne still couldn't stand the sight of me, so she wouldn't be taking me along. She promised she would bring Snow back before sunset, so we could celebrate the shared birthday together. But that night, they didn't return until long past midnight. Madeline called to say that Snow was exhausted from playing and had fallen asleep. She claimed she didn't want to wake the child and was staying over at a hotel. In the dead silence of the night, I sat by the window. I sat there for a long time, remembering the feeling of my grandmother's hand in mine. Before she passed away, she spoke in a voice heavy with sorrow. "If no one is ever good to you again, what will you do?" "Grandma," I whispered to the empty room, "I don't like birthdays anymore." Out of basic politeness, I let the two of them inside and poured them each a glass of water. Skylar grabbed a calendar from the cabinet and pointed to a date circled in red. "This is Daddy's birthday now." Snow looked at me with eyes full of confusion and anxiety. Her lashes were wet. She wanted to speak, but didn't dare. From their appearances to their mannerisms, mother and daughter were two peas in a pod. Perhaps I was merely a passing shadow in her life, for Snow didn't possess a single trait that resembled mine. Madeline began stacking the gifts in a vacant corner. This was my oversight. "Next time." "There won't be a next time," I interrupted. And you don't need to come here anymore. Madeline's back was toward me, her frame turning rigid. After a long silence, she slowly turned around. I'm sorry. Can I speak with you privately? It was rare to hear that word escape her lips. I made the two girls some juice, turned on the TV to a children's channel, and led Madeline out to the gazebo in the garden. It's beautiful here, isn't it? Madeline said, her usual strength replaced by a hint of bashfulness. Thank you for the compliment. I went straight to the point. Whatever you have to say it clearly. I see there are no other women in your life right now, Madeline began. If you don't mind, would you consider remarrying me? I stared at her, saying nothing. Madeline seemed flustered, avoiding my gaze. I just feel the child needs a complete family. Lately, Snow has changed. She isn't as stubborn or arrogant as she used to be. So, you didn't marry Julian Thorne after all? Madeline froze. Back then, everyone told me he was the one who suited you, the one who was meant to be Snow's father. Even if he never said it to my face, I knew you agreed. That's why I stepped aside to make room for him. And yet, after all that, the two of you still didn't end up together? Madeline couldn't bear my gaze. Her hands clenched and unclenched instinctively. That's all in the past. So are we. But we have a child. And so what? Madeline, stop using other people as an excuse. First it was Julian Thorne, now it's Snow. I let out a soft, dry laugh. Would it be so hard to just admit that you actually have feelings for me? I used to wonder just how lowly I appeared in your eyes that it made you feel ashamed to acknowledge me. Affection is a difficult thing to hide. Just like I never had to say I loved her, the flush of my ears and the racing of my heart betrayed me long ago. Our marriage lasted 4 years. Despite my patient nature, if she hadn't given me at least a sliver of hope, I don't think I could have endured those 4 years. I have no idea when she started to develop feelings for me, or how much of it was genuine affection. For a long time, I simply followed my grandmother's philosophy. When something is broken, your first instinct shouldn't be to throw it away and replace it, but to patch it up and try to make it last. I applied that same logic to our marriage. I thought that if Madeline wasn't entirely cold toward me, then perhaps if I tried just a little harder, things could get better. I spent years scavenging for tiny crumbs of her love, trying to gather those scattered sparks of affection in the hope they would light my path. In the end, I did manage to light the way ahead. But all it revealed was a jagged, treacherous road, reeking of a decay that made me sick to my stomach. Those sparks weren't enough to keep me going, and they certainly couldn't offer me any warmth. They only served to make the utter failure of our marriage more clear. Madeline, I said, I used to wonder if you just had such a rigid moral code that you couldn't allow yourself to love anyone but Julian Thorne. But then I realized, if your morals were truly that strong, how could you stay so entangled with your first love after knowing you were married to me? The truth is, you're just selfish. Even now, when you want to come back to me, you have to hide behind the excuse of Snow missing her father. But Madeline, we've been divorced for 4 years. Madeline swallowed hard, her voice coming out strained and hoarse. So, am I too late? I let out a soft sigh. It's all over. Madeline looked forward, not back. I knew how much pride she had. Seeing her suffer didn't bring me any joy, but it didn't move me either. I stood up in silence, wanting to leave her alone in that small space. Before I could walk away, she reached out and grabbed the hem of my shirt. She gripped it so hard her knuckles turned white and the veins in her hand stood out. She had lost so much weight. There was a fragility about her she could no longer hide. I heard the sound of suppressed, broken sob. Don't come back again, I said. Go back to your life with Snow. I gently pried my shirt from her grasp. I didn't forget to tell her one last thing. The day I celebrate as my birthday now is the anniversary of the day our divorce was finalized. That was also the day I found Skylar. She doesn't know her real birthday, and I wanted a new one too. And so, we both decided to take that day as our date of rebirth. Consider an early birthday gift from you to me, a gift of peace. Thank you, Madeline. Afterward, she led Snow away without a word. But Snow had already sensed the truth. Before leaving, the little girl clung to my legs, refusing to let go, sobbing heart-wrenchingly. Her voice was shrill and raspy, her face flushed red, gasping for breath as if she might faint at any moment. I'm not going. Mommy, let go of me. I want my daddy. She struggled with all her might, pleading with me. Daddy, don't abandon me, okay? I'll be good from now on. I'll listen to you. I won't make you sad anymore. Please don't take me away. Mommy, you're a liar. You said Daddy would forgive me. You lied to me. You're mean. The car door slammed shut. I saw Snow crying against the window, her tiny fists pounding on the glass, looking at me with pleading eyes. Madeline grabbed her, pinning her down, and gave the order to the driver. She didn't look at me again. Throughout the departure, she never turned back. Skylar stood beside me, looking up with hopeful eyes. "What is it?" I knelt down and asked her gently. "They won't come back again, will they?" "No, they won't, sweetheart." "Are you sad, Daddy?" I simply smiled and ruffled her hair. "Skylar, everything passes. Just remember, no matter what pain you encounter, as long as you keep moving forward, never stopping, never looking back, you will always make it through." I'd already walked a long way, while Madeline and the others seemed to remain standing still. But that's all right. They were never meant to walk the same path as me, so there was no need to stop and wait for them. That night, I had a dream. I dreamt of a few years back, when Snow had just been born. I had exhausted myself caring for her and fallen asleep on the sofa. In my hazy state, Madeline had come home late and gently tucked a blanket around me. She brushed the hair from my forehead and gave me a soft kiss on the lips. "Good night, honey." At that moment, I truly thought I would spend the rest of my life with her. Later, I understood. Life is too long. No one can accompany another until the very end. She was a passerby in my life, a bold stroke of color in my otherwise quiet existence. But that was all. Madeline and I had reached the end a long time ago. Epilogue: The echoes of a broken home. For a long time after the divorce between Madeline and Ethan, a suffocating gloom hung over the Sterling household. The man who had never truly been welcomed had finally departed. Madeline, already a woman of few words, became even more reclusive. She buried herself in work and business trips. When she did return home, she usually just collapsed into sleep. Snow, on the other hand, didn't seem to have a care in the world at first. She spent her days dragging her nanny from one place to another, erupting into loud tantrums the moment she was dissatisfied. But one day, she suddenly asked, "Where's Daddy?" The nanny didn't know how to respond. Snow took matters into her own hands. She crawled under tables, checked every wardrobe, and spent half the day scouring the garden. But there was nothing. Where exactly was Daddy hiding? Children usually forget quickly, but Snow was exceptionally bright. She could still clearly remember the last time she saw Ethan. It had been that final morning. Before Ethan walked out the door, he had smiled, knelt, and ruffled her hair. "Little girl, Daddy is leaving. I used to hope you would be a good, obedient child. But I understand now, you and I are different. You have the right to be stubborn. Live a happy life, okay?" At the time, Snow hadn't paid any attention to his words. She had always hated Ethan's lectures. But now, as she recalled that memory and looked around the vast, empty villa, realizing that his presence was gone from every corner, a deep sadness finally began to take hold. That afternoon, when Madeline returned home, Snow did something rare. She reached out and grabbed her mother's hand. "Mommy, did you and Daddy have a fight?" Madeline stopped in her tracks and looked down. Snow's face was full of innocence, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Can you say sorry to Daddy, so you can make up? I haven't seen him in forever. I want to eat the sweet and sour ribs he makes. Can we have them tonight?" Madeline stared at Snow's expectant face. At first, she showed no emotion, but then a cruel smile slowly spread across her lips. "I didn't have a fight with him. Do you even know what a divorce is?" "Divorce means he doesn't want you anymore." Madeline seemed to savor the fear blooming on Snow's face as she repeated herself. "Snow, he doesn't want you. From now on, he'll have other children who are more obedient than you, cuter than you. In his heart, you no longer matter at all." "You're lying. Daddy would never leave me." Snow shrieked. "I'm not abandoned. Daddy said he loves me most." "You've been tricked," Madeline laughed. "Snow, you were fooled. Did you actually believe those words of love?" "Madeline, what kind of nonsense are you telling the child?" The Sterling elders rushed into the room, pulling the emotionally shattered Snow into their arms and whispering comforts. "Snow, don't cry. Mommy is just joking. Daddy just had to go back to the countryside for some work. He'll be back in a few days, okay? I want to see him right now." Snow struggled, her body thrashing. This was exactly what Madeline hated most, Snow's stubborn, entitled attitude. She watched Snow's breakdown like a cold, detached spectator. She felt nothing. Even as Snow cried so hard she began to gag, Madeline only frowned slightly before turning to walk upstairs. In her bedroom, everything remained exactly as it was when Ethan lived there, including the massive wedding portrait still hanging on the wall. Sometimes, Madeline didn't understand her own mind. When she and Julian Thorne had broken up years ago, she had blocked his number and thrown away every memento without hesitation, wanting him to vanish from her world. Yet, after the divorce from her husband, she hadn't thrown away a single thing. It was as if throwing them away would mean admitting defeat. She fought to keep her emotions steady, desperate to prove that Ethan's departure hadn't affected her. She convinced herself that divorcing a man she didn't love was a form of liberation. Yet, 6 months later, when Julian Thorne suddenly asked her to marry him, she hesitated. "No, let's not," she replied after a long silence. Just 2 days ago, Snow was throwing a tantrum, demanding to find her father. "If I marry you, she'll definitely make a scene." Thorne looked into her eyes. "Are you really refusing just because of Snow? Is there no other reason?" He let out a mocking laugh. "Madeline, sometimes I admire you. You're so good at lying that you've even managed to deceive yourself." Madeline didn't understand what she was supposed to be lying about. But by the time Snow turned 18, Madeline was still single, while Ethan had remarried. Perhaps she had begun to love everything associated with him. For even Snow felt a strange curiosity when she heard her father was marrying a schoolteacher. On the wedding day, Snow attended the ceremony. When she returned home, she sat at the dinner table and initiated a conversation with Madeline. She spoke about how the atmosphere was lovely, not many guests, but very lively. Madeline listened in silence, chewing her food. Mother and daughter were both so emotionally drained that they didn't even bother to make eye contact. This was their usual dynamic: little affection, fewer words. They were a typical wealthy family, overflowing with etiquette, but devoid of intimacy. What Snow didn't know was that Madeline had been at the wedding too. She had even sent a red envelope, a bank card inside. Ethan refused it. "Keep it," she told him. "I know you don't need it. This is just a gesture. I have nothing else left to give you." Ethan shook his head. "You don't need to give me anything." He wore a simple suit, incomparable to the grandeur of his wedding to Madeline, but the smile on his face was far more genuine. Madeline stole one glance and quickly looked away. She was afraid that if she looked a second longer, she wouldn't be able to stop the tears from falling, or stop herself from begging him not to marry, begging him not to leave her behind. In the quiet dressing room, someone knocked. "Is the groom ready? It's almost time to go out." "Ready," Ethan said, standing up. He looked at Madeline. "Snow is outside too. Why don't you stay for the meal before you go?" "No need." Madeline shook her head and walked toward the door. She gripped the handle, then suddenly spoke. "Right. There are a few things I never told you. Oh, I was once jealous of Snow, and of your grandmother." Ethan was taken aback. "What are you talking about?" "Everyone said you were madly in love with me," Madeline said, her voice calm and flat. "But I always felt that in your heart, your grandmother was more important than me. I was very unhappy about that. Then, when Snow was born, no matter what we were doing, the moment she cried, I vanished from her eyes." She gave a self-deprecating laugh. "I hated Snow too. Subconsciously, I wanted to possess all of your attention. It's a pity I didn't have the fortune to keep it, and I ended up losing even what I once had." She paused, her hand trembling on the door. "Actually, on that fateful night, I was sober. I woke up after being drunk, and I was completely aware." Finally, she turned back to look at him one last time. "If you're ever unhappy in the future, find me anytime. But if you are happy, please don't tell me. You know I'm not a good person. Seeing a happiness that wasn't brought to you by me, it makes me want to destroy it." From the first day that teacher had appeared by Ethan's side, Madeline had known. The urge to sabotage them had flared up instantly. She felt like an ugly scorpion lurking in the shadows, planning to ruin Ethan's second spring. But Ethan laughed so joyfully. He looked truly happy. Staying away from the ceremony was the greatest blessing Madeline could offer him. Was she sad? Deeply. Did she regret it? Profoundly. But regardless of the pain or the regret, she and Ethan would only ever end here. Madeline remembered the very first time she met Ethan. Her grandmother had sent her to pick up a country boy from the train station. She hadn't wanted to go at all. Seconds before she saw him, she had been complaining about him to her friends on the phone. But when she looked up and saw him, she nearly lost her breath. He was like a cool breeze, sweeping away the summer heat, leaving only the sound of cicadas and the sunlight shimmering through the leaves. The spark was instantaneous. She had done so many things she didn't understand, her gaze constantly drifting toward him in the gaps of her life. By the time she woke up to it, they had already reached a point of no return. She had watched the light in him fade day by day, replaced by a growing shadow. At that time, she truly believed they would be together forever. In a daze, Madeline seemed to fall into a dream. In the dream, she returned to their wedding day. The officiant held the microphone and asked her, "In poverty or wealth? In sickness or in health? Madeline Sterling, do you take Ethan to be your husband?" She heard her own voice answer, "I do."